morning at the Dome. The time will be 1, 2, 3, 4. Exactly.
Woke up this morning without a warning. Words were still ringing in my head. It came, it seemed within my dream, a gentle voice, and this is what it said. Stop now, you got to stop and listen to what I say. Stop and feel that you've been missing.
Oh, you've just got done listening to the intro. Here is by Perry Mills Project, and Pick Up the Call. This is some good stuff. We had Perry on in that 5D panel we had a few weeks ago, and we will be getting him on the show here one of these days. We just got to set up the details for it. He's quite an interesting character. But yeah, check out his music. There's a link below to check out Perry Mills Project. Really good stuff. You're listening to Tom and Ramon with the 100th Monkey Radio, and a couple of plugs I'd like to throw out there before we get going. John Kelly, who has also been on the show, has started a YouTube show, a daily 5-day-a-week show called UFO AM, and
UFO PM.
Yeah, and he's doing it at 7 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the evening. That's Pacific time. And I'll tell you what, this is something that the UFO field has needed. Somebody doing daily reporting like this, and he's doing a fantastic job. His presentation is exceptional. You guys know he's been, if anybody who knows anything about John, he's been working with the Examiner for quite a few years, and he's been chasing those lights in the sky around for a long time. He's quite a conscious individual too. So
yeah, it's some amazing news, and also like he goes into all of it, and he really pulls, because there's some really debunking stuff. Like in England, he was telling about the news how they're saying that the UFO thing is down, and he was like, "What?" Yeah.
He had an article on today. His top story today was about that Mile High sighting in Denver. Did you happen to see that, Ramon?
No.
There's a guy that got a shot with his home video camera, and he just set it up for like an hour. And then when he saw something flash, I guess, and this is what prompted him to do this in the first place, he set his camera up and filmed for about an hour, and then when he played it back and slowed it down, a very distinguishable craft that came out of the earth, jetted around, popped around in the sky, and took off. And he said this is repeated several times, so he got a hold of the news station there in Denver. They came out with their $20,000 video gear, and set up and did the same thing, and they got the same thing. So this is like a very impressive sighting.
Well, it's impressive that they even came out.
A news crew came out, and they set up, and they had their stuff sitting watching the sky for an hour, and when they played back, they saw the same thing. So check out John's show. We're recording this on the 12th of November. So check out John's show on UFO AM from November 12th, and you can get the full story from him. Some pretty good stuff.
Oh, by the way, speaking of, I will be in Korea from December 6th to the 9th. So if there's I know we have a few listeners in Korea. I would love to at least be able to have lunch with you guys and pick your brains.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
What Korea's like as far as this whole scene.
And likewise, a few days before that, on the 3rd of December, I will be headed down to LA myself, and I'll be down there till the 6th. So if any of you guys want to hook up for lunch or anything, drop us a line and maybe we'll hook up and chat. So
Yeah.
let's see. Another plug I want to throw out is for another new radio show that just came online. They aired their first show last night. It's the Shadowland Voyagers, and my girlfriend and significant other, Elizabeth, is one of the co-hosts there. They've got Sienna Lee, Christina Grant, and Elizabeth Hensgen that are they're doing a pretty good job. They've got a very, very unique approach to dealing with and bringing some of this stuff to the surface that people have to work through. You know, they're calling it the Shadowland Voyagers, and that's basically referring to the shadow self, those dark aspects of self that have to be brought forward and dealt with to actually be able to progress in our conscious path. So
Yeah.
check them out. They're on Truth Frequency Radio Network, and also there'll be a link in this show for that also. So
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we're coming up. I guess when this air, it would be our 2-year anniversary, Tom.
yes, it will. Yes, it will. This is happy anniversary, Ramon.
Happy anniversary.
Oh.
Where's my present?
Yeah. Well, this is what's this 2-year anniversary supposed to be? There's some special thing, right? Is it
I
a
think
poll or something?
we can talk about it and we can put it on the website. So this is like something I'm just coming up with on the air here. But we have like our little monkeys, and we're gonna try to make a deal where you can get the our little monkey that has 2 years worth of the show, all of Tom's video thing,
I don't fit 2 years worth of the show on a monkey, Ramon.
You can't fit 2 years worth of monkeys?
No. Well, I mean, I'd have to compress it down. That'd be quite a challenge to, I'd chop the quality up pretty bad as far as the audio recordings to get it compressed down that much.
How about...
They're only 8 gigs thick, so... Anyways.
Yeah, we'll work on it and we'll put it on the website. So
yeah.
We'll see some kind of nice deal we can give you guys for 2-year anniversary.
Yeah. So, let's see, anything else? You can find us Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Vimeo, iTunes.
Vimeo?
Who else? Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's it. So before you introduce our guests...
I do have one more thing. We have been having a few issues here in the last couple of weeks with our audio host. The guys that are actually storing all of our audio online for us, and the players that they offer with their service. So if you guys are having any issues being able to listen to the show, clicking on the little player and getting things to work, please don't hesitate at all to get a hold of us and let us know, because the feedback from you guys is what it takes for us to, thump somebody in the head and say, hey, get this right type stuff.
Yeah, and also because Tom's in Washington and I'm in Japan, it's pretty much almost a 24-hour thing. So one of us will get back to you.
We try to be pretty quick with responding to, especially the support calls. So
yeah. Check out the news section too. Tom put up a bunch of new stuff. So the electric bikes takes China by storm. I'm gonna run through this really quick. Moral behavior in animals, which is amazing if you have a pet. What happens to the soul after death? And I think that's it as far as like new stuff on the news. And I just want to say quickly about our guest. I'm gonna call him the grandfather of exosociology. Because he wrote a book, and I'm gonna let you introduce him, Tom, but he wrote a book, and it says, the first of his kind, and he's not kidding. He's not tooting his own horn. He's talking for reals. Yeah, but he's definitely I would call him the grandfather of sociology, and the reason why I call him the grandfather, not the father, because I think it would be some years before some some university guy will come in and then call himself the father of this. So before that person in the future, sometime in the future, there was this person. So who is it, Tom?
So tonight we've got George Lobuono with us. He wrote the book Alien Mind, and after doing graduate study concentrating on the underside of U.S. history, George Lobuono reported for the Suttertown News in Sacramento, then covered the 1993 presidential elections in Indonesia for Pacifica Radio Network, and investigated deep politics and black budget crimes. In 1995, he began to research aliens and alien-related programs in the U.S. government. He also serves on the board of a free legal clinic in Sacramento. George Lobuono began to research aliens after an incredible experience in 1995. He's the author, which we'll have to definitely probe into, author of Alien Mind, a book about the thought and behavior of ETs. He's now writing a second book about how we're ready to initiate our own choice of relations with alien neighbors, in part via remote communications that anyone can learn to do. His website's alienmindbook.org. And he's actually got several different versions of that you can get a hold of. There is the paperback. I think there's a Kindle, and then you can read it right online for free if you're not able to cough up enough to get yourself a hard copy. So that in itself, I got to say kudos to him, because I think we need more people actually putting their material out there because they feel it's important for people to know. So welcome to the show, George. We are very excited to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
So how does it feel to be the grandfather of exosociology?
Well, it's interesting. I think the remark you make, you say, won't be long before if a kind of disclosure happens. Some university professor will be making a certain claim, and I think that's probably dead on.
Yeah, I saw your book and I had to order it, so I ordered it and I was talking to Tom, and Tom was like, "This is right up your alley, and this is what you've always been talking about." So Tom, I'll let you ask the first question.
So it's what you're always talking about, Ramon. Go for it. Hot potato.
Let's start off with I guess with your past. How did would you call yourself a news reporter?
I have done some news reporting. I did graduate study essentially I concentrated on the underside of U.S. history, and then did some writing and reporting. And actually what happened in my background that probably is of interest is I was, I think if people wondering like what is my kind of writing, it would be investigative reporting. I've also written some fiction. But in 1995, talking about maybe 12 years ago, almost 13, contact began in my case. I was essentially contacted. It was a kind of telepathic, or aliens call this psychotronics and telepathic, because aliens, you have technology that essentially amplifies or somehow it kind of expands mind signals. And you listeners have probably heard about how the Roswell craft had this sort of headband so that it could be controlled with thought waves.
Right.
And also people have heard about how aliens kind of, can do stuff really fast, because psychotronic was mind-activated technology, can both listen to thought, but it can also respond to thought. It goes both ways between mind and the technology. So aliens have that kind of stuff. And so, contact began again in 1995. I had been skeptical. I thought, the speed of light, how would they get here in any doable way? And of course, if people who've been paying attention to physics Colonel Philip Corso, the guy who wrote the book The Day After Roswell, the man who actually was the first big kind of disclosure, I would say, in a full book sort, came out and said that aliens had this kind of technology that apparently could read. The Roswell aliens had this kind of, he said they studied an alien that was downed at Roswell, and their technology showed that it had long or low-frequency waves coming out of the alien's brain, and somehow it interfaced with the technology. He also said that the alien craft seemed to fold gravity in order to make jumps through space-time. It was sort of riding in the wave of gravity. And this new science, this new technology for essentially kind of faster than light, reportedly, or almost instantaneous travel in certain hops across space-time, a lot of hops, and that you couldn't go from here to some distant galaxy, I imagine, instantly, but a bunch of hops, sort of stretching space-time and then releasing somewhere else, sort of folding gravity again. So I think, what's interesting to say is that I think it's important to realize that, if I were contacted, I guess I should go back a little bit to what we were talking about. If I were contacted for any reason, the only reason I would have been contacted is because I do investigative work. I try to ask hard questions. I look at the corruption on the underside of government. And here in the situation where that happened with me, there were aliens abducting, and there's a kind of, seems like secret interactions in the U.S. military. And believe me, if any of that kind of information gets to me, I'm not going to keep it secret. It's going to come out. I mean, if the president said to me, this is just life or death, you can't say, don't say this, I would say, of course, But I mean, when there's basic information about how our population and how we're being contacted and what the natures of those aliens who are contacting people and anything about Roswell, I'm just going to get it out there. It's my specialty. And so I would imagine the only reason I would have been contacted is for two reasons. One, expecting that I would pass the information on in some written form because I'm a writer and was a writer at the time. And two, is that I would expect it, I was being provoked. Contact began in my case by aliens essentially sort of challenging the gray alignment intervention in here. When I say gray alignment, I mean the grays, the aliens associated with the grays, the ones with those, wraparound sort of almond-shaped slit eyes, the ones that are associated with the Nordics. And Philip Kropp also says aliens called so-called Verduns. But all of those aliens work together. I would have been expected to develop a critique of them and to dig for information. So that would have been why contact began in my case. So, and what I've written about is my book is about the thought and behavior of aliens. And I've been, it's taken me 15 years, or actually more, it's taken, 17 years now. 17 years. It took me about 15 years to get to where I could even think that I could write a book, the second book, which is now about how we can choose our own relations and do a kind of remote sensing, remote contact on our own. First, I had to work through the science of it all. The first contact was completely awesome. Made my hair stand on end, just even idea that aliens would exist. So walking through the park in San Francisco, contact began with, it was hinting directly at me about what a fifth dimension would look like in sort of a fourth dimensional space-time, how it would sort of be bent in a kind of faded but very graphic, expanded way for me to see. Not my kind of thinking. I previously had telepathic interactions with humans, but the human sort of structures were very conservative, very sort of guarded, and nobody would ever have done that. And I had gotten a scholarship an academic scholarship at the University of Illinois for 4 years. And I think of myself as fairly smart, but this is much smarter than me in explaining things and, of course, suggesting that it was alien. And it didn't take me very long to deduce that was exactly true. And he continued and provoked and hints about this and about that and challenged me to rethink and essentially sort of teasing me with one bit of information. And as aliens do, they expect you to go out and think and research. You don't just sit there and try to milk an alien for information. And so it also caused me to develop more of an analysis of what was going on. And then I researched about what was going on with aliens and, the U.S. black budget complex, as you mentioned earlier. And so hence my first book, which came out about 5-6 years ago.
So who were you in contact with? Person?
Yeah, that's a good question. The people who read my book, they have a good sense for what I'm going to be saying in a moment, but the people who haven't read the book are going to probably wonder about where I'm coming from when I say this. So most people who have contact tend to suggest, it's like the Greys or the Nordics or something like that. In my case, it was essentially provoking me to think beyond them, and I'm fairly certain, absolutely certain that there's an advanced group of aliens or population in the Milky Way and another advanced group of aliens, and that the more advanced group is essentially running the whole thing. And, I'm just amazed, how that ever happened to me. It's like when something like that happens, you think, wow, first you might think, why me? If you're being abducted, you might think, why me for another reason? Because, why is this affecting my life this way? But it was interesting and caused me to rethink everything. The thing is this, is that you start to interact with aliens. I would never have written a book about how aliens think unless I had been in direct contact, because I could sort of glean what other people were saying, but not be sure about what I was about to describe, characterize, and then really plunge into in depth. Well, in context, since it happened so often, it's been ongoing since then. We're talking 17 years. I write about this, or I can write about this it's just second nature. You write about what you know about. It's like you know about your family, you know about your relationships with other people, you know about things that you experience directly firsthand, and that's why I was writing the book. And so and the interesting thing is, contact begins, and at first you're I won't say you're unsure about it, but a lot is said, because what happens is a kind of telepathic interaction, and aliens compress more information into a kind of sudden burst. And I think they do this in a sense. Their technology is it's called scalars. Scalars are kind of like when you converge light waves so that they cancel out. Your brain can actually do this. You can your mind can actually do a kind of scalar, and here's how it happens. Scientists, let me begin again. Scalars are like this. For example, scientists say they converge lasers. They're pointing them at each other at the same point. They converge at the same point in space, so that the rolling hump in one light wave from one direction is exactly opposite, or like the mirror of a rolling hump on the opposite side, coming from the opposite direction. And they do this from X, Y, and Z, or 3 different lines. Doesn't have to be 90 degrees like that. It can be in any slight distance off of a flat plane. It's in 3 dimensions. And then what it creates is called a standing wave. Waves converge, they cancel out. There's still energy there, and it's looking for a place to go. Well, according to Tom Beard and other energy researchers, they merely have to vary that energy level, and it sort of bleeds into a kind of deeper, it's called deeper fluctuations, or it bleeds into, Bearden calls it electrogravity. Some people call it scalars, other people call it gravitics for short. People say scalars, gravitics, they mean the same thing. 0-point energy, it's all the same. Well, in your mind, you can actually do this in a kind of telepathy. I should also backtrack a little bit, because scientists have shown, for example, Colonel Corso was saying they studied an alien downed who still survived, who was still alive at the time in Roswell, and the Army determined apparently very soon that it had these long, low-frequency wavelengths. And the interesting thing about those long, low-frequency wavelengths is that they're called ELFs, or extremely low frequency. They can go right through solid objects. Our science shows that easily, because the atom is mostly empty space. Well, that's one basis. You could have that for telepathy. But the new basis, the more interesting one, is these scalars. And here's how you could do that. In your mind, it's as though in the center parts of your brain, you have this kind of field effect. And you may not realize it, but you can very easily manipulate that field effect. And what it feels like is this, using the central part, not the big sort of gray matter up on the top, but down in those lower areas called the stem, the brain stem, some people call it the reptile brain, the limbic system, that you feel like you do a half spin and a half flip. In other words, it's sort of like bending the energy field there, and it's converging the energy so that it cancels out. Guess what? The rest of your brain, that bigger upper sort of gray matter, you call it the cerebrum up there, can do kind of parallel contouring of that. And by contouring, by merely sort of contouring that, you're sort of varying the energy level, just like I said before. So you've converged the energy, then you're contouring or varying the energy level. And it's like, I guess you'd say like a parabolic sort of antenna. If you contour that so that it's on a more narrow focus, in other words, sort of like a little bit not so open, it would resonate with a distant space, or near distant space. If you have a very wide open contour, you can resonate across greatly distant spaces, and even with greater sort of expanses of space. And the interesting thing, I know I'm throwing a lot of science at people, is that scientists say the following, that you can resonate almost instantly. And that actually agrees with what many contactees say, is that they do kind of, aliens do an instant sort of telepathy, and aliens reportedly in some cases have told people they can communicate with their planets almost instantly, because there's something about these scalars that somehow sort of tunnels down into deeper structure in space-time. I'll quote you a source on this. His name is Dr. Eldon Bird, Ph.D. He's a Naval Surface Weapons Laboratory physicist. And like Bearden and other people, sometimes they talk about these new technologies in very brief ways. They don't want to be the center of the whole Earth's attention, apparently because they're officials. And he said the following. He said, the thing about scalars is that, it takes no time for these scalars or these kind of gravitic fluctuations to go from one point in space to another, because it's almost instant. That's the thing about these scalars. And the whole reason I'm telling you all this science is because the mind can actually do this for a remote kind of resonance. Essentially, it's as though Dr. Stephen Greer, for example, the head of CSETI, talks about how he can be doing remote sensing. He calls it remote viewing. And many people in the military and CIA, or a number of people, say they've done actual remote viewing for the government. But Greer talks about how you can, it's as though your perspective, it can be way out, as though you're out in space, sort of looking back. It's not 100%, color, vivid visual. It's a little faded down, and you can essentially sort of pick up remote sensing details, looking back as though you're sort of, your perspective is out there or in some other place. It's as though you're really, what's really happening, of course, is you're resonating across a whole kind of, imagine like a giant bubble or orb-like space, and it's resonating all around that. So it's as though you're both here and there. It's like bi-location is what people call it, or they use different terms. And so the point is the mind can do this, and anybody can do this. For example, we're talking about how aliens think. I'm not just now trying to, make a new path for humankind. We're talking about what aliens do every single day. Aliens, even Corso back in 1947 after Roswell, he's talking about how he had an experience that was telepathic with an alien at one point, and the aliens were communicating using their minds. And contactees, abductees, everybody says, yeah, they primarily use telepathy. And the point about that is that, how do they use this telepathy? Well, they have technology that sort of amplifies. It's kind of like an amplification. It really is an expanding of the mind signals out into a sort of a larger space within which they sort of resonate from one point to another point across a distance. But anybody, you don't need technology to do that. Your mind can do that right now. It's as though when you're contouring using that larger part of your brain. I talk about it in the book, by the way. If you don't get all this right now, well, just go to the book. You can read it free on the web or buy it, whatever. And your mind can do this instantly across great distances. And the point is, I would say this. I know I'm maybe getting ahead of the audience, but I'm actually convinced that the most important development or result of Roswell, alien contact, or any alien anything, all of it is not technology, it's not devices or weapons. It's the new science of mind. And using this new kind of science that anybody can do what I was just telling you about, converging, canceling out, and sort of contouring. Anybody can. It feels a little different the first time you try it. So day one, don't assume you're going to just, all of a sudden be all over the place out there like that. Day one, you're getting the feel. Day two, you have a memory of how it feels. Now you're doing finer tweaking of it. And so as it goes forward, you get better and better. But the point is that aliens do this all the time. That's how their devices apparently operate. That's how they use technology for education, reportedly. It's how they get senses of things that, they pick up on what's going on. Contactees say, like, they're doing a remote viewing of aliens, and aliens immediately know. It's either because they can pick it up or the technology picks it up and then alerts them in some more vivid way. But anyone can do this, and that's, I think, essentially we're in a kind of a new era, because the first era was essentially early sort of reports of aliens, and this led up to times like Roswell. Well, suddenly it got more scientific, more technological. Also, there was a security aspect, so there was an urgent need to be more up to speed and competitive in a sense. Well, phase two, was a kind of an analysis of what was going on. People are looking at abductees, contactees, studying the technology, leaking some information from officials, people from different places, comparing notes. They talked about it like we're doing now. Step three, I think, is where we are right now. We're way past first contact. We're considerably past just first preliminary understanding. Now we can begin to choose our own contacts and essentially study and investigate aliens without just being the passive recipient or, the abductee or the whatever being told what to do as though, say, abducting aliens are telling you, laying down the law. We can investigate and choose our own way.
Right. So back to your personal contact. You said you were in contact with a group of beings that were above the main hierarchy that's out there right now?
Well, what I would say is this. They're competitive with. The ones you're talking about, the main hierarchy, I assume you're saying the Greys and right. Maybe the aliens associated with them. The thing about them is that, for example, there's a very famous contactee case named Philip Krapf, or Krapf, Krapf, a Pulitzer Prize-winning editor for the Los Angeles Times, who in 1997-98 said was contacted directly, actually taken aboard and asked to do a kind of white paper for these aliens so that they could do a contact with humankind. And he was given very specific information over days of briefings and was shown a portfolio of about, I think it was 1,600 different other humans who had been contacted, as 800 or so as diplomats. The other 800 is kind of so-called ambassadors. And they were supposedly going to go very public with this. Well, I've been, actually had contact with some of those aliens, in the same way over the years, and they're kind of contentious with me. First, information is suggested, maybe they're legal or something, and then they'll say you've got to be careful, don't tell other people too much about it. In other words, you're supposed to be very guarded about what they say. And in other words, they're trying. They say, oh well, they don't want somebody to misuse information about science because it might go towards weapons purposes. But I think that's a bunch of bunk. I think they're trying to keep a low profile and essentially determine the whole agenda, and they don't want you developing an analysis and helping other people develop their own analysis where people.
Well, we had a little bit of a snafu with my recorder, and George is going to pick up a couple minutes back here. We had a question on the
who were the
aliens?
Right.
Yeah.
There we go.
So what I would say is this, going back about 2 minutes, is that the aliens that contacted me initially apparently are Milky Way aliens who would be competitors to what the Greys and the Verduns, the aliens that Philip Kropp was contacted and actually taken up by. And they were trying to provoke me to develop better analysis and study of what was really going on in terms of abduction and the Grey alignment. What I was saying when we cut off is that Philip Kropp wrote his book. He's the LA Times Pulitzer Prize winning editor who was taken up to write the white paper for the Verduns for their contact, a kind of a diplomatic opening to humankind. And it kind of stalled, and he said there were 1,600 different people who were connected as supposedly diplomatic contactees, and he saw their photos and names, and he said some of them are fairly well known in different places or in different ways. But the irony was that the Verduns told Kropp that Verduns are about 500 trillion in number, and if you stop and think about that, that's a big number. That's 500,000 billion. But you could actually fit that 500 trillion aliens in a galaxy the size of the Milky Way, and it would still only be about one out of every 600,000 to about roughly 1 million stars. So, you could fit them all in one galaxy. It doesn't mean they're a superpower. There are 50 to 100 billion galaxies, and only maybe 13-15% of those are big galaxies, but in other words, there are many, many aliens. Verdans would not be a superpower. They'd probably be a low intermediate population, and they're aliens that are much more advanced than them, older too. But the irony is that the Verdans told Kropp they are from a galaxy 14 million light years from our sun. Well, if you don't know about astronomy, 14 million light years is, well, there are about about 4 different galaxy groups that are closer than that. And in those 4 galaxy groups are about 150, maybe probably more like 200 different galaxies. So Verdans are not even near us. They're in the big universe, they're kind of near, but they're not even in a nearby galaxy. So when contactees and abductees say, there's a quote where people sometimes say, they're part of the Galactic Federation. Well, they just aren't. They are not even native here. They're probably not even significant here. My sources say they're not significant at all much in the Milky Way. So there's no federation here in the Milky Way that would recognize them. And that, I assume, is why I was being contacted to help develop a critique. Because, people are falling for these abductees who have only one contact, and I had a contact at the beginning that was critical of and trying to provoke a critique of the verdant gray kind of, I guess you'd call it an alignment.
Yeah. I kind of want to get into your source. Are you not allowed to say who your source is?
Oh, okay. No, I can say whatever. Everything for me is open. My sources, in the book, sources are other contactees, abductees, writings, research of other people.
No, I meant
alien source. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
The aliens would be like this. The aliens that contacted me would be, I guess you could call them hyper-advanced aliens. That's what I wrote in the first book. I call them hyperversals. They have been around for billions of years. They're older, much more technologically advanced than are the so-called Verdans, far more advanced. And in addition to them, there's another population that I'm writing about in my second book that was pointed out that is reportedly 130 million years more technologically advanced than we are, and they live on between 1,200 and 1,400 planets in the Milky Way. I was also shown a map showing an overview of the Milky Way with 4 different quadrants, showing big circles, a large circle in 4 different, each different quadrant. Not exactly, broken perfectly squared quadrants, but you know what I mean. 4 or 5 larger circles showing the locations of megapopulations in the Milky Way. And one of these has been interacting, and it's they're also kind of like Verduns in the sense intermediate population, but they're not here abducting, not with the Greys, according to all sources. So they would be kind of an independent critique. There are also older, let's say billions of years old population. There's one associated with the Verduns, and that's interesting because the hybrid billions of years old population here in the Milky Way has been very sharply critical of them, and essentially it's sort of been like a heads up. People need to wake up, think more, advance our understanding and awareness in order to develop a critique of all of that, because it's essentially it's like a colonizer has come in and is trying to essentially hold all the cards and control everything here and shut people up, essentially trying to cut us off from our neighbors. And that's really impossible to do because we can contact neighbors. Anybody can do this. Remote sensing allows it, and I don't know about travel just yet, but we can find out a lot already as we are where we are.
Yeah. Can you tell us what these different aliens look like? The ones you've been in contact with, the Verduns, and is there a name for the ones you've been in contact with?
I don't have a name. I was told that one name for the one. I'm not sure which population. One name of one of these hyper-advanced aliens is called OARI, and I'm not sure which population that was. Maybe the ones associated with the Verduns are the ones connected that apparently reside here in the Milky Way. That's just one name I can throw out. The Verduns look like this. They're about 5'7", 5'6", 5'7". They have big heads, very thin bodies, a typical sort of tannish kind of white kind of skin, or tannish to sort of grayish, and have these slit eyes. Kropp was writing, and other people said that their eyes. One of the other sources on this, her name is Carol Rosin, who works on anti-space. She's against space weapons. She had this story where she was in a room with a national network news correspondent when 2 or 3 Verduns just sort of came through the wall, like, when aliens do an abduction, and met, and they were talking, or essentially communicating with these 2. She and the news person, who my assumption is that would be what they call their diplomats, one of the people who had been pre-contacted regarding the Verduns opening to humankind. Otherwise, they would not have made themselves apparent because, the Verduns don't show up as much as do their sort of dependents or their lesser related aliens like Greys and, so forth. And it must have been a person who's fairly important to them. But, Carol Rosin, again, is one of the sources for corroboration. I'm also a source for corroboration on the existence of the Verduns. And they have these slit kind of eyes. You ever seen those eyes that the lids look like they're closed almost and barely open? That's how the Verdun eyes look. It's very distinct from the Greys or from us or from, other alien accounts that we've heard about. The 130 million year old population that I've recently started to write about looks kind of like a typical alien, kind of probably medium to probably about the height of a Verdun. Big heads, the skin color, I just have to say it's kind of light skin color, light tones. Eyes probably, can't specify the eyes, but tall, fast movements. Not tall for an alien, taller than Greys, and tall, thin, and typical large, big alien head, and humanoid. We call that people when they talk about bipedal, 2 arms, 2 hands, and not a lizard-looking thing crawling on the ground. They call that humanoid. It does not mean it's exactly like human, like those so-called Nordics or those others who may be hybrids in some cases.
So
by the Great Verdun Alliance.
Real quick, the development of the large head, is that indicative of a spacefaring race, or is it?
I would suggest it may be either a recent precursor, or probably about the time they are spacefaring or afterwards, because they have to advance their genetics. Evolution allows for a certain sort of, brain size, but I think they like the idea of growing the brain larger somehow for more capacity, more the ability to do more things at one time. And so that to me is indicative of a more advanced kind of alien that's probably already spacefaring or just recently just about got there. So yeah, I think I personally think that humankind within maybe 1,000 years is going to have tweaked genetics to have larger brain size and probably maybe do some improvements for certainly longevity, living longer.
Right. Right. So, have you met anybody else here on Earth that is in contact with the same beings that you are?
Yes, in fact, other people. As a matter of fact, one guy was writing about the so-called contact with Verduns and this other counterpart. As a matter of fact, it's really interesting. One guy, he's on Michael Sala's called P4C website, and he was writing me. He's saying, I contact I think it's the aliens you're talking about. I think he's presumably talking about the 130 million year old native aliens native to the Milky Way, who pose a kind of they're definitely kind of a competitor, and they're an alternative to just saying, oh well, Verduns and Greys, we're stuck with them. And then I asked him, I said, tell me more about them, and he started to characterize them. It was just spot on what he was saying, Maybe talking about the same group, I assume, because the 130 million year old group was pointed out to me, presumably because I think they're the aliens, the kind of mega population. If you look at their 130 million years and think about 1,200 planets, 1,400 planets, you're talking about easily trillions of aliens on those, thousands of well, possibly thousands of billions. I mean, certainly, you're talking about a large population. Think of them as a mega population. They would be important in the Milky Way, but probably not absolutely the most advanced. And that's an interesting thing to raise because they are different different sort of categories of aliens. We're young, we're very new, but there are other, young, located on one planet. Imagine, say, up to about like 10 million years, or maybe 1 or 2 million years, They're sort of kind of like we are. After about 2 to like somewhere up to a few hundreds, they'd be kind of an intermediate population who've done a lot of work on their genetics, a lot of work on their technology, and you get up to billions of years, and those would be essentially sort of maybe kind of hyper advanced compared to those others. Well, Verduns at 229 million years, older than us, and you can expect, for example, the Kepler satellite went up about 18 months ago, and it showed that JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, is estimating based on its look at other stars. The satellite is looking and finding maybe 40 billion or more Earth-sized planets in the Milky Way, and that 40 billion number is only within, like, say, the orbit of Mercury. It's closer in than Earth. There are billions more probably out where in the kind of orbits that we have around stars in other in this galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy. But JPL estimates that there are probably about 2 billion Earth-like planets. Doesn't mean they're all inhabited, but, with the possibility of being Earth-size or habitable. So imagine there'd be lots of populations. We're only 4.5 billion years. Our planet is only 4.5 billion years old. So you can imagine. Scientists, for example, there's a science article pointing out this last year that only, I think it was 300 something light years away from us in the Milky Way, there's a planet that is 12.7 billion years old. And
wow.
It may be a slightly different composition, but think about that. So that would mean, give it another billion years or so, or planets similar to that, to be seeded with oxygen and metallic elements, billion or 2 years, and you're still looking at a situation where here in the Milky Way, we can almost assume that there are some populations that are billions of years older than we are. And, they would be so advanced that they wouldn't come along just stay to Earth and say, hey, they don't necessarily have to be mega populations, but they wouldn't be saying, hey, this is who we are. They don't want Verduns copying them. You know what I mean? Is that we can assume that there'd be a number of populations that would be much more advanced. So the point being is that if we're getting a kind of heads up now about alternatives to, say, essentially a kind of pseudo-colonization and abduction and, it's kind of clandestine, attempted to look clandestine, but now increasingly obvious in our skies, then we can assume that there are also, ample and abundant alternatives right here in the galaxy where we are.
Right. We're kind of one of those most interesting shows on the block right now because of where we are technologically. I think because we are right on the verge of that, stepping out of our own off of our own planet, so to say, and start trekking out there.
Yeah, if you look at us. And you obviously know that. Just imagine 50 years ago how different we were. Imagine how we're going to be in another just 25 years, because technology sort of advances exponentially. It just goes really fast. Once you get to the point where you have high capability computers, and you're starting to do wireless networking, and imagine our wireless. I would predict that our wireless form is going to go scalar in a relatively short time, because people are going to determine we don't want microwaves. And I think what they may actually be thinking more importantly is this: we don't want to just broadcast our stuff everywhere out into space so that we can be taken advantage of. We want to have it sort of more tightly sort of configured and controlled here on this planet, and it'll go scalar because it's, you know, it's faster, it's easier, it's tremendously higher information capacity. People will realize if you start doing this kind of, you know, scalar kind of telepathic interaction, resonance, this kind of mind resonance across the distance. It's just much more information is conveyed. So what I would suggest is that, you know, in 25 years we're going to be very different. 50 years, but you compare that to aliens. Now, aliens have been around for millions of years, and they're not changing so fast. So they look at us and they know it's a really fast sort of change, kind of evolution curve going on here. We're finding out about aliens. People are just getting to where we can start to compete with or investigate aliens in return, which is what my next book is all about. And so that means that, you know, if an alien visited and left 50 years ago and came back here, they would think, wow, big changes. I wonder what they're going to be like. So they'd probably be watching us, wondering, you know, these are neighbors. Let's kind of try to help them if we can, without sort of scaring them or coming down and imposing or doing an Independence Day or like V sort of, you know, just scare the heck out of people by being right above Central Park or something like that, or the White House.
Yeah. Like I was saying in the beginning of the show, I'm very interested in the sociology of all these different species. What can you tell us about their culture?
Well, you know, very good point. Very, very good. Because I think what you're suggesting is that there are differences between the populations. Younger populations tend to, the first crisis, the first sort of hurdle they clear is the obvious one that we're starting to kind of look at, because it keeps getting, you know, it appears and then disappears, disappears, depending on the political rhetoric. And that is where the society decides, what we have to do is be more organized on a whole global scale. We're like citizens of the globe first. That's more important than nations and states and, you know, cities. That comes after. But more important is that we all sort of agree that we have to share the war, essentially sort of parked to one side, and our security is about just securing the whole planet. And I think that's a really important threshold that we have to sort of look at. And if you look at how it fits in a larger scale, that's where we're going. That's what's happening. And then, you know, you get a global identity. We're sort of, once we get past that threshold, and we have we'll be a little bit more like alien populations. They'll be more likely to want to communicate with us. But I think we need to educate our society, because if people, you know, we have 50,000 different sort of primitive or sort of isolated boxes, ideas about how aliens are, then some people are going to be saying, oh, they're saviors. They come down here, those aliens, and they're abducting us because they want to save us, while others are saying, whoa, wait a minute. For example, my sources and in my analysis is that we have other neighbors, but, you know, people, nonetheless, you know, you would never, I would say, my advice is that never allow, you know, certainly where we are, the way we are now, don't allow aliens, any aliens, I don't care who they are, none. Don't allow them to base themselves here. You want to try to contact them or sense or investigate who they are, that's a different story. But aliens come down with their technology, and you know how technology is. It's like the United States. If it takes its technology and, you know, set up a base somewhere, it's not made out of admit it, but it's going to try to control events there. You can imagine aliens trying to do the same with even more rationale thinking, oh, they don't know so much, and we should try, you know, keep pulling strings. But the aliens, you know, a lot of aliens have been saying, yeah, that's why you need to first get your act together on your planet, and then be more discreet, you know, because you're very young, you're very vulnerable as a population. Doesn't mean you don't want to know about aliens. You want to do disclosure, you want to find out more, but you also don't want to just say, you know, we're vulnerable, you can do whatever you want, you could come in here, hijack, you know, manipulate, and, you know, gain resource advantage or something. You know, also we need to kind of watch out for people here who are going to say, oh, guess what? We did a secret deal with the Greys, and now we can go out and search for real estate and do trading deals with them. We're like the little junior puppets. Pretty soon they're controlling us, you know?
Well, what about all the reports that that's already happening here, where there is already that race that, or several races that are here that are actually pulling the strings right now?
No, I think those reports are very correct. I think what we have to watch out for is that we can identify who those people are. First, you know, because we can talk about it and we could say, oh, you know, yeah, that's happening. But until the rest of the public knows about it, nobody's going to do anything. It's still going to have this slight ridicule factor. And here we are, 65 years after Roswell. 65 years after Roswell now. 65 years after Roswell, last July, and we're still trying to get people to realize that that the astronauts, former White House people, intelligence directors, people in other countries, heads of militaries, have all been admitting that aliens exist. A kind of disclosure has gone on a limited version in order not to scare people too much. Because if the military came out and said, here's what we know about abductions, here's what we know about them, here's the kind of threat they could pose, people might freak and think, it's like an arms race with aliens, and that's not going to go anywhere. That would just wipe out all the our possibilities. I think military and some people think we need to do a limited disclosure, but the problem is they're not doing enough of it, because people they think, well, what's your proof? Tell me, what's your proof for aliens? All this kind of stuff. And until we sort of clear that hurdle, then we're not going to be advancing in those other ways, because people just aren't assimilating what you're.
They really created a self-sustaining monster when they put the smear campaigns into effect back in the 50s about the whole ridicule factor and all the shills they threw out there to push those buttons and throw out the mud, so to say.
It's like Corso said, though. Corso said that General Nathan Twining, who pretty much had a high level in the early, back when Truman still had control of alien-related programs and was being told directly about Roswell, Nathan Twining said that the cover-up will be the disclosure, and the disclosure will, the cover-up will sort of shake, the box will be shaken, and disclosure will keep leaking out. In other words, the plan was that the cover-up would eventually sort of just fall apart, and that's kind of where we are. And so we were just talking about how would we know about which of those aliens are just kind of on the scene, and we don't know who's what until people sort of pass the threshold where they think, we are, 2 generations, essentially 2 or 3 generations past Roswell. It's time for a whole different sort of expansion of the discussion.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed with not all abductees, but a lot of abductees, they have that what's that called? It's a psychological thing when you're abducted, like a lot of kids would be abducted by
post-traumatic stress.
No, where they start getting emotionally attached to their abductor.
Oh, the Stockholm Syndrome.
Yes. So I feel
you begin to sympathize with the abusers. You're being kidnapped. You're being subjected to things, and you start to sympathize with the violator of you. And that's what happens. And I think that happens because, imagine being an abductee. You're absolutely awed by them, but yet you see you're being abused. There's reproductive material being taken, screen memories, implants. The question is, why would there be implants? Well, it's obvious to see that if they're doing breeding programs, sort of implantation and then removing stuff, they'd want the implants to be able to find out when somebody's going to have an abortion. It would be damaging to their property, which is they consider it their property. The fetus that's been, hybridized, implanted in the human for the first stages, and then later removed and sort of, developed fully. The gestation, meaning the later stages of growth, are done supposedly in a liquid tank that many abductees have seen these, and they all describe the same kind of tanks. So, we sort of, you have that Stockholm Syndrome, but the people, they're so awed, and yet they're so repressed in a sense, that it takes them, they don't get a larger perspective, which is why I wrote my book. So people don't have to think, aliens think only how these aliens who have been abducting think, but aliens, you look at a larger picture. You have to really look. Some people don't realize this, but if Corso and Kropf and all these, and various, I would argue are the best sources, if they're correct, then our first early explicit contacts were intergalactic right from the start. And I think it's almost, once you begin to study and look at how aliens are, or aliens almost would have to be, even if you're doing any model of it and you study the universe, intergalactic interactions occur with the new technology. Scalars, supposedly you can travel between galaxies within a human lifetime easily. You could get from here to another galaxy and spend a lot of time there and come back. So meaning that more advanced aliens would be studying, interacting, you have sort of, shared conventions and be alerts. For example, Verduns are coming here. Our aliens in the Milky Way might contact the Andromeda Galaxy, which, by the way, in 3.5 billion years is going to merge together with the Milky Way into a larger sort of round or elliptical-shaped galaxy. And I would imagine they would both be communicating and saying, look, do you really want a population that's 500 trillion in number coming into this galaxy, which is going to be a little bit more swirled up, in some places less habitable, in some places a challenging energy environment, too much radiation, or do you really want them coming in just when you're having to deal with all those stresses and have even more aliens sort of coming in and mobbing up the situation, especially when the Verduns and Greys are not even from this galaxy? I think they would all agree and say, look, give humans a heads up, make sure humans know what's going on, make their own decisions, but informed decisions about that and about the absolute need to be more conservative and actually ecological, not expanding your population too much, not going out thinking it's just anybody can grab planets like it's real estate, because I think humans, if we tried to do that, what we'd find is that there'd be kind of weird accidents going on. In our current state, you would just not get out there because the aliens around us would be watching and thinking, okay, have you got kind of inequality? Are you aware about aliens? Do you realize that there are other populations all around? You have to leave many of these star systems unoccupied for the future generations, or even for evolution to occur in some of those systems. You can't just go out and be another pig going out trying to, conquer and take whatever you want. They don't want weapons out there in big numbers. It's just like, nukes here. We see certain populations, we discourage them from nukes. Well, assume the aliens would be doing the same, and reportedly they're doing the same here regarding these sort of scalar technologies and scalar weapons. You don't want to go out with weapons looking for real estate because that's not wanted.
Yeah, so that attitude right there must be where Stephen Greer gets his idea that all extraterrestrials are peace-loving, have the best intent, et cetera, et cetera.
I also think that Greer essentially he doesn't realize it, but he very much favors the aliens he's in contact with, who obviously, unmistakably, are gray alignment, gray verdant-related aliens, because that's, their appearance, the way they act, the hybrids too. And because he's sort of been close to them and had personal interactions, he doesn't think that he's been abused. Although, ironically, if you read his books, he sort of suggests that he may have been abducted when he was just a teen. And, in Greer's case, he says he tries to tell people that he thinks that no aliens are doing any abducting because they're too evolved to do that. But I suggest that Greer just simply needs to be a little more independent and think, remember, he's a human. He's not one of those aliens yet who, I would argue are a certain way and have a certain agenda. And you have to have, if you don't have a critique of what's going on, it's like, if you don't have a critique of the United States, what would you think? Oh, the United States can do no wrong. The same with aliens. They're up in animal nature at a certain level. Their bodies are biological liquid based, and no matter how old they are, you'd have to be aware that they can have certain assumptions, and even in animal nature. There's a book. It's called Contact with Iarga, written by Stefan Benard, about aliens who reportedly live only 10 light years away from us, in which it is very plausible, very vivid, with beautiful illustrations. You can read it free on the web. And they were telling him that, you have to remember that even among aliens, there's always, in order for a species to survive, they have a kind of a dualistic nature, meaning there's their good side and there's also kind of a bad side, but let's say slightly more primitive. But that can be part of how they actually sort of are able to defend and survive. But that bad part, or the darker aspect of their nature, can sometimes result in cases of repression, even extreme cruelty, even among aliens, believe it or not, and in a manipulative sense, obviously here. And so that you have to be aware of that you can't just assume that human nature is. Well, for example, the old Marxian analysis was that if you simply distributed the wealth equally, everything would be fine, because human nature was obviously only good if everybody was provided for. But even in those systems, the point is that all alien populations, every single one that we've heard about, know about, or investigated, reported are equalitarian. That's within a society, not necessarily between those societies until how they, agree. So, if you went out with the old, say, Marxian analysis and thought, as long as we share resources, then it's all going to happen. But what if you've got just one regime headed by one elite, which starts getting a little bit corrupt or cruel or whatever? Maybe you can see examples of that on this planet. And you need checks and balances. You would need to have, more than just one place where, a vote or sort of counterbalance could be registered in just, say, the United States or Europe or one. You wouldn't want just one world regime in one spot, because it could go very badly wrong. Right.
Well, we're at the top of the hour here, so if you would, George, let us know where people can pick up your book and stuff, and when's your new book coming out?
My book, if you want to read it, it's called Alien Mind, and you can read it, either get it on Amazon, or you could get it in Kindle, or you can actually read it free at my website, which is alienmindbook.org. That's all one word, alienmindbook.org. My new book, 2013, I'm shooting for. It's about halfway through, and I think it's important that I get it out because I notice that more is going on around us than many people are prepared for. And the whole purpose of this is so that people can independently investigate and do much more as aliens do.
Yeah.
Great.
In the second hour, I want to go more into the mind exercises that we can do to start making contact, and also I want to bounce off some of my own experience with the telepathy thing.
Good.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for listening to the first hour here. If you are interested in checking out hour 2, and you are not a member, I would urge you to hit that subscribe button and become a member of become another monkey. There you go.
Yay!
Yay. Oh, let's see. We love you guys. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
And we'll talk to you in the second hour.
Good morning. At the dome, the time will be 1, 2, 3, 4. Exactly.
Woke up this morning without a warning. The words were still ringing in my head. It came, it seemed within my dream, a gentle voice, and this is what it said. Stop now, you got to stop and listen to what I say. Stop and feel that you've been missing along the way. Put aside your petty fight, serve your dignity. You've got to show the heart that you've been hiding and set it free. There's just one door in a world gone wrong. We all need love, and if the cure for one is the cure for us all, there's an urgent message trying to reach you. Excuse yourself and pick up the call. You gotta pick up the call. It came the same way the very next day. The words they just kept on coming through. Hard to conceive if you believe me. This is what you really want to do. You got to tune into your inner being. Now let it be. You got to activate your inner vision. Now let it see. Cast out the doubt, the mindless chatter. Now let it go. It's time to tap into the heart of matter. 'Cause don't you know there's just one door in a world gone wrong. We all need loving, and if the cure for one is the cure for all, step right up and don't be shy. Excuse yourself and pick up the call. You gotta pick up the call. heart's simple in the end. You got to tune into your inner being. Now let it be. You got to activate your inner vision. Now let it see. Cast out the doubt that the mind is chatter. Now let it go. It's time to tap into the heart of the matter. 'Cause don't you know, there's just one cure in the world gone wrong. We only love it. And it's the cure for one, it's the cure for us all. Step right up and don't be shy. Got to look yourself right in the eye. There's a magic moment trying to meet you, an urgent message trying to reach you. The phone is ringing off the wall. So pick up the call. You gotta pick up the call.